Hey folks, this is Rhykker with another Diablo lore video. In today's episode, we explore everything about treasure goblins, their realm, their queen, and more. Who are the treasure goblins? What are the treasure goblins? And most importantly, why are the treasure goblins? This is an addendum to our Diablo lore series in which we explore the characters and story of Diablo. We'll get back to the main story soon, but with Season 14 being the season of greed, I figured it would be timely to dive into how treasure goblins fit into the lore of Diablo. Feel free to check out our previous episodes if you haven't, and be sure to have subscription notifications turned on to be alerted of new episodes. So on to treasure goblins. The first lore we ever got on these little buggers was from renowned scholar, historian, and apparent absent-minder dropper of lore books, Abd al-Hazir, who said, quote, "Some devious little goblins have been robbing our merchants. When pursued, they simply open portals and disappear with a most aggravating chuckle. The peasantry seem to believe that the goblins serve a great demon lord known as Greed, and furthermore that their portals lead to Greed's domain. A ludicrous notion, truly. So we know that treasure goblins are small demons with grayish bodies and lizard-like heads. We know they are servants to the Baroness, Greed, who we'll talk more about in a bit. They're scavengers and opportunists who scuttle amidst battles to collect loot from fallen soldiers. And I guess not so fallen soldiers, and otherwise not fallen merchants. They're able to use some form of magic similar to a town portal to return to their domain, which, contrary to Abd al-Hazir's assertion, is very real. Sightings of treasure goblins have increased shortly after the appearance of the Fallen Star. That is to say, the events that led to the start of the story of Diablo 3. They're so common that most citizens of Sanctuary would recognize one if they saw it. So this explains why treasure goblins were not seen in previous Diablo games. It's totally not a retcon, guys. Now, in all seriousness, there actually is some precedent for having goblins in the Diablo universe. If we go all the way back to the original design document for Diablo 1, the pitch made by Blizzard North back in 1994, which was then known as Condor Games, the company, not the year, we see that the game at some point intended to feature, quote, "an open ending that will allow for different themes in future sequels, where goblin caves or a living fungus world will have to be explored and conquered." So clearly treasure goblins were added into Diablo 3 in order to fulfill a promise made all the way back in Diablo 1's design document. All that's left now is a living fungus world, aka Mushroom Kingdom, which we'll see in the Diablo Super Mario crossover game. Now among treasure goblins, one stands apart: Snitchley, the aspect of greed. He's larger, much larger than other treasure goblins. And rather than have a town portal power, he instead summons minions to protect him as he's being attacked. Maybe he's just too big to fit through the town portal. Huh. That actually makes sense. Now, what does it mean to be an aspect of greed? I'm asking you, I don't know. We'll circle back to that soon. Let's talk about the Vault, aka the Treasure Realm, aka Greed's Realm. This is Greed's domain. It's a cave of massive proportion, filled with mountains of gold and treasure that have been presumably stolen from the citizens, merchants, townsfolk of Sanctuary. Within it, there is an area called the Inner Sanctum, which is where Greed resides. Now, no mortal had ever been to the Vault before the Nephilim goes there in Diablo 3. And as a little bit of behind-the-scenes trivia, the inspiration behind the Vault was a mixture of Goblin Town in 2014's The Hobbit, as well as Scrooge McDuck's Money Pit, and just a beehive. So that gives some insight into goblin society. In the cases of bees in a beehive, you have drones go collect honey to bring back to the hive, all in service of a queen. And in the case of this goblin society, you have treasure goblins go collect loot to bring back to the hive, all in service of a queen. Now, in a beehive, you have different bees that serve different functions. And the same holds true for the Vault, just with less bees. There still might be some bees. I don't know. While treasure goblins go out to find and retrieve loot, we have other types of demons that perform other tasks. We have the Vault Peons, These are lesser servants of greed. They're small demons similar to imps, and peons are apparently performing daily duties like cleaning, sorting the loot, and construction projects. And then we have the vault sentries, aka the hobgoblins. They protect the vault and the treasure peons and treasure goblins within it. They wield maces and are similar to demon troopers, who are the demons that form the bulk of Azmodan's army. Occasionally, hobgoblins will leap out of portals, ambushing players, showing that they too possess the same sort of town portal magic that treasure goblins have. And that takes us to the Baroness herself, Greed, aka the Queen of Greed. The vault is the domain of the Baroness, Greed, who is assumed to be the leader of the treasure goblin horde. Now, Greed is a demon consumed by greed. She's obsessed with all things valuable. Every 3 hours, she takes a bath in her gold, and she has a compulsion to just increase her physical wealth. She's never satisfied. So she sends out her goblin minions continuously to collect more treasure. The incoming gold then has to be tallied, and the existing gold must be inventoried to make sure none has gone missing. Basically, the entire caste system within the vault is engineered to bring in, tabulate, and store as much treasure as possible. And to help her minions gather as much treasure as possible, Greed equips some of them with magic gems, such as the Boon of the Hoarder gem, which is a legendary gem in Diablo 3. Now that's about all we know about treasure goblins, Greed, and the vault. However, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to express a fan theory. I'd like to dive into some lore speculation on Greed. This is not stated anywhere in the lore, but I believe Greed was one of Azmodan's sin lieutenants. And the rest of this video will consist of explaining and defending this theory. So Azmodan is the Lord of Sin. We know that Azmodan has some powerful minions known as the Sin Lieutenants, and they helped him gain dominance over the Burning Hells. We know that there are 7 of these Sin Lieutenants, each embodying a different vice. In Diablo 3 Act 3, we meet and defeat 2 of these Sin Lieutenants, including Gome, Lord of Gluttony, and Sedea, Maiden of Lust. The lore further states that greed and pride were among Azmodan's favorite sins. So given that we know that there are a total of 7 sins, and that at least 4 of them correspond to the 7 deadly sins of Christianity, then it is reasonable to assume that there is a Sin Lieutenant for each one of the 7 deadly sins, namely lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, envy, and pride. So we've already established who the Sin Lieutenants for lust and gluttony are. So moving on to finding who the other Sin Lieutenants are, in more recent Diablo 3 lore, we met Vidian, Lord of Envy, with the free content update that came with the Necromancer pack. According to the lore, Vidian would, quote, seldomly obey the will of his master, Azmodan. Based on that, I think it's very reasonable to assume that Vidian was the Sin Lieutenant of Envy. So that covers 3 of them. Now, beyond that, there is a reference to a demon lord named Zabul, Lord of Wrath. We find this reference in the lore text for the Burst of Wrath item in Diablo 3, and the lore reads, Zabul, the Lord of Wrath, forged this weapon after the primevals declared they would not invade the world of Sanctuary. 1,000 demons died in the process. Now, given that the Sin Lieutenants appear to be either the lord or maiden of a given sin, it is not unreasonable to believe that Zabul, Lord of Wrath, wrath being one of the 7 deadly sins, is Azmodan's Sin Lieutenant of Wrath. To strengthen that theory, we know that when the primevals discovered Sanctuary, they decided to corrupt humanity and use humanity as a weapon against the high heavens, rather than just invade and conquer humanity. And we know from the lore that that pissed off Azmodan and his allies that wanted to go the war route. And this seems well in line with Zabul's sentiments, which further cements him as an ally of Azmodan and thus a likely Sin Lieutenant. So that covers 4 sins, leaving us with greed, sloth, and pride. Now we see no reference to a Lord of Sloth, however, we do encounter in-game a demon named Bolin, aspect of sloth. Now, an aspect does not seem important enough to be a lieutenant. An aspect of something suggests that it is subservient to a lord or maiden of something. We've met many aspects in the game. We've met the aspect of Anguish, Andariel's minion, who serves Andariel, Maiden of Anguish. We've met the aspect of Destruction, Baal's warmonger, who serves Baal, Lord of Destruction. The aspect of Hatred, Mephisto's disciple, who serves Mephisto. The aspect of Lies, Belial's assassin, who serves the aspect of Pain, Duriel's Dark Rider, who serves the aspect of Sin, Azmodan's legionnaire. The aspect of Terror, Diablo's herald, who serves Diablo, Lord of Terror. Now, we even met in Act 3, Zalusa the Grasping, aspect of Envy. And we met Zalusa long before Vidian was introduced to the game, and thus the lore of Diablo. So, in a similar way, I believe that Bolin, the aspect of Sloth, serves the Lord or Maiden of Sloth, a character that we have not been introduced to yet, but who is one of Azmodan's Sin Lieutenants. And that leaves us with Greed and Pride. Now, we can assume that there's going to be a Lord or Maiden of Greed based on the fact that every other sin has had a Lord or Maiden, and we believe that these Lord or Maidens correspond to these Sin Lieutenants. Similarly to how Bolin is the aspect of Gluttony and Zalusa is the aspect of Envy, we know that Snitchley is the aspect of Greed. Aha, you see, there was a reason I called your attention to the aspect of Greed, and it was to make my future point more, no. So with there being an aspect of greed, that implies that there must also be a Lord or Maiden of Greed. And that further implies that Greed herself is the Maiden of Greed, since she rules over the goblins, and thus who else would Snitchley be subservient to? Now, to further corroborate that Greed is the Maiden of Greed, Abd al-Hazir referred to Greed earlier as a demon lord. Additionally, as we previously stated, the hobgoblins or vault sentries under Greed's command appear to be a variation of the demon troopers from Azmodan's army, so it makes sense that she served under Azmodan. Just like Sadea rules over the succubi, Greed rules over the goblins. Now, obviously, there are some holes in this theory that need to be explained, namely that Greed is not called the Maiden of Greed. So this is where my fan theory kicks in. Greed previously was a Sin Lieutenant to Azmodan, known as the Maiden of Greed. Perhaps she even had a proper name, like the Baroness, Maiden of Greed. Like the other Sin Lieutenants, she helped Azmodan conquer the Burning Hells. Oh yeah, we didn't get to that part of the story yet. Spoilers. But after that, she then turned her attention to Sanctuary and its many riches. Motivated by her singular driving force, greed, she abandoned Azmodan and the Burning Hells to create her secret lair in Sanctuary, where she brought with her minions, the Goblins, and set about to accumulate as much wealth as she can, unfettered by the silly war between angels and demons or their invasion of Sanctuary. Now, we don't know for sure where the vault is located, but I believe it's located in Sanctuary and not the Burning Hells. To quote an old forum post by community manager Nevelistus, treasure goblins are highly trained professionals specialized in the transportation of valuable goods throughout the dangerous lands of Sanctuary. They are particularly skilled at engaging evasive maneuvers when avoiding the hostilities of local Nephilim. Now, treasure goblins are meant to grab loot and transport it back to the vault. So if we've confirmed that they transport loot throughout Sanctuary, then that implies that the vault is found in Sanctuary. Maybe you can call it a pocket dimension of hell that's connected to Sanctuary, but whatever it is, it seems to be removed from the rest of the Burning Hells and away from Azmodan's purview. So after she defected, Azmodan renounced her as a Sin Lieutenant, stripping her of the title Maiden of Greed. So from then on, she was just known as Greed, or by the title that she gave herself, the Queen of Greed. A title that the devs used to refer to her back in Blizzard's 2014 What's Next panel. And that's my theory on the backstory of Greed. But what are your thoughts? Do you think my theory is plausible, or am I grasping at straws here? Sound off in the comments. That's gonna wrap up this video. More lore videos will be coming, picking up where we left off in the story of the history of Sanctuary and the universe of Diablo. If you haven't seen those other lore videos, I encourage you to check them out now. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch and Patreon supporters for making these videos possible. If you like what you see on this channel and want to support the creation of more content, you can pledge on Patreon, where your support is immensely appreciated. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Rhykkers Raiders for more Diablo content.